Just one kiss, whispered the billionaire, never knowing it would steal her heart forever. Hello, everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support truly means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let us get back to our main character. The night was heavy with rain, the kind that painted silver streaks on the glass walls of the Hale Hotel's rooftop bar. The city lights shimmered through the mist, blurring into pools of gold and blue. Inside, a man in a tailored black suit sat alone at a corner table. His name was Alexander Hale, 34, billionaire, CEO of Hale Dynamics, and the kind of man whose silence made rooms fall quiet. Across from him stood Lena Moore, a young art teacher with rain on her hair and debt on her shoulders. Her dress was modest, her shoes damp from the downpour, and her eyes, tired but steady, held the courage of someone who had run out of options. "Marry me," Alexander said evenly, his voice low but clear against the rumble of thunder outside. "Just think of it as a contract." For a second, Lena thought she had misheard. "Excuse me?" she asked, her breath catching. He leaned forward, his gaze sharp and calm. "You need financial security. I need a wife, a temporary one. It will last 6 months. You will be compensated well, no strings attached." Lena blinked, a small laugh escaping in disbelief. "You are joking, right?" Alexander did not smile. "I never joke about contracts." The wind outside howled, pressing the rain against the glass. She looked at him, this man whose face she had only seen on magazine covers, whose empire seemed untouchable, and wondered what kind of loneliness could drive someone to say something like that. "I am not looking for love," she said quietly. "Good," he replied. "Neither am I." The air between them held the weight of something impossible. Behind them, the elevator doors opened, spilling a brief gust of chatter from the bar below. Alexander reached into his jacket and pulled out a single sheet of paper, an agreement printed in perfect legal font. "You sign this," he said, sliding it toward her, "and every debt you owe will disappear by morning." Lena stared at the page, her mother's hospital bills, the foreclosure notice pinned to the refrigerator, the art scholarship her students had lost when funding was cut. Her entire life, sitting in ink and promise, right there on that table. She looked up again, meeting his eyes. "And what do you get out of it?" He exhaled, almost like a confession. "A wife, on paper, someone the board will accept, someone trustworthy." Lightning flashed, white and merciless. For a heartbeat, neither of them spoke. Then, without another word, he reached across the table. His hand was warm, steady, and when his fingers brushed hers, she felt the jolt of something real hiding beneath all the businesslike calm. "One kiss," Alexander said quietly, "to seal the deal." And though every instinct told her to walk away, Lena found herself frozen, caught between fear, curiosity, and the strange pull of a man who had everything except the one thing that could not be bought. The next morning, the rain had cleared, leaving New York washed in pale sunlight. Lena Moore stood in front of the towering glass building of Hale Dynamics, clutching her purse like it was a lifeline. The night before still felt unreal, his offer, the contract, that strange, quiet kiss that had sealed it. She could have sworn she would wake up and find it was just a dream. But the crisp paper inside her bag said otherwise. When she stepped through the revolving doors, a woman in a gray suit greeted her with a professional smile. "Miss Moore? Mr. Hale is expecting you." Lena followed her through a marble lobby where every step echoed. She caught her reflection in the glass-wrinkled coat, simple hair, nervous eyes, and felt completely out of place. The elevator ride felt endless. At the top floor, Alexander Hale was already waiting in his office, standing by the window that framed the Manhattan skyline. The morning light fell across his sharp features, calm as if last night had been nothing more than another business negotiation. "You came," he said simply. "I signed the contract," Lena replied, her voice quiet but steady. He nodded once. "Good. My attorney will finalize everything today. The ceremony will be tomorrow afternoon. Private. Just us and the witnesses." "Tomorrow?" she asked, startled. "There is no reason to delay," he said. "The faster it begins, the faster it ends." She wanted to ask him why he chose her, out of all the people he could have hired, but the words would not come. His calm made her nervous, like standing too close to a storm that had yet to break. The assistant returned with a folder and a card. "Your new residence, Miss Moore," she said. "The Hale penthouse on Fifth Avenue. You will move in tonight." Lena blinked. "Move in? Already?" Alexander looked at her. "It will be temporary, but the press must believe it is real. There are appearances we need to keep." Her fingers tightened around the keys. "Appearances," she repeated almost to herself. When she left the building, the wind carried the faint hum of traffic and city noise. She stopped on the sidewalk, staring up at the endless blue glass of his company. The deal was done, but something inside her whispered that she had just stepped into a world that could swallow her whole. That evening, as the sun sank over the skyline, Lena stood at the doorway of the Hale penthouse. The doorman opened the massive glass doors, and warm light spilled into the hallway. It was breathtaking white marble floors, towering windows, and art pieces that probably cost more than her entire apartment. Alexander appeared from the study, no tie this time, sleeves rolled up, a glass of water in his hand. "Welcome home," he said quietly. "This is not home," she said before she could stop herself. He smiled faintly. "Not yet." They stood there for a moment, two strangers bound by paper and necessity. The silence between them was heavy, but not cold. "Dinner is at 7, he said finally. "Dress however you like." When he walked away, Lena looked around the penthouse again, the perfect furniture, the immaculate view, the feeling that every corner was watched. She dropped her small bag on the sofa and sat down slowly, her heart still unsure whether it was beating from fear or something else. Outside, the city glowed gold. In the reflection of the window, she saw her own face beside his, the man she had agreed to marry tomorrow, and the stranger she still did not understand. She whispered to herself, 6 months. Just 6 months. But deep down, she knew that one kiss had already changed something she could not take back. The next afternoon, the sky hung low and gray over Manhattan. Inside a quiet courthouse, Lena Moore stood beside Alexander Hale, her hands trembling around a simple bouquet of white lilies. There were no guests, no music, only the steady echo of the judge's voice reading the vows that sounded more like a legal document than a promise. Alexander's expression never changed. Calm, controlled, perfectly distant. When the judge said, "You may kiss the bride," he leaned forward, brushed her lips lightly, no warmth, no spark, and whispered so only she could hear, "Just business." Lena nodded, her throat tight. She managed a polite smile for the witnesses before lowering her eyes. Her heart pounded so loudly she could barely hear the rest of the ceremony. Minutes later, they stepped outside into the cool air. A car waited at the curb, black and gleaming. Alexander opened the door for her. "Mrs. Hale," he said, as if testing how the words sounded. The title felt foreign, like clothing that did not fit. She murmured a quiet thank you and climbed in. As the car pulled away, the city blurred by in streaks of silver and light. At the penthouse, photographers were already waiting at a distance, flashes glinting through the rain. Alexander placed his hand gently on her back as they walked inside, keeping up the performance. "Smile," he murmured. "The world is watching." She forced a smile, her cheeks aching. When the doors closed behind them, she exhaled in relief. The apartment staff had decorated the living room with roses and candles for photographs. The scent was too sweet, almost suffocating. Alexander handed his coat to the butler and turned to her. "There is a press dinner tonight," he said. "Our first appearance as husband and wife. My assistant will help you prepare." Lena set the bouquet on a table. "So we go straight from the courthouse to pretending we are in love?" He met her eyes evenly. "Pretending is what this is, Miss Moore. The sooner you accept that, the easier it will be." Her lips parted at the sharpness in his tone, but she said nothing. Instead, she walked to the window. The city stretched below, glittering and cold, and for a moment she wondered how she had ended up here, a teacher who used to paint sunsets with her students, now playing the wife of a man made of marble. That evening, as she got ready, a stylist and makeup artist arrived with racks of designer gowns. They spoke politely, never meeting her eyes for too long. She let them work in silence. When she finally stepped into the mirror's reflection, she hardly recognized herself. The dress shimmered pale gold, her hair swept back, her lips painted soft rose. Alexander appeared in the doorway, wearing a black tuxedo. For a moment, something unreadable flickered across his face. "You clean up well," he said. She gave a small smile. "Do I pass your inspection, Mr. Hale?" He hesitated, then offered his arm. "You look perfect." The dinner was held at the Hale Foundation Gala, a fundraiser for children's art programs. Ironically, the same kind of funding that had once been cut from her school. Cameras flashed as they entered. Alexander stayed close, his hand at her waist, whispering directions like cues on a stage. When the host announced, "Please welcome Mr. and Mrs. Hale," applause filled the hall. Lena smiled on instinct, her heart fluttering with something between pride and guilt. As they posed for photographs, she heard one reporter call out, "Mr. Hale, was it love at first sight?" Alexander looked at her, his eyes calm but softer than before. "You could say," he answered, and for the first time, his voice did not sound rehearsed. In that instant, under the bright lights and the echo of applause, Lena felt the ground shift beneath her. For all the contracts and conditions, something real was beginning to stir, and she did not know if she was ready for it. The next morning, sunlight spilled softly through the tall windows of the Hale penthouse. The scent of coffee lingered in the air, but the space felt strangely hollow. Lena Hale, the name still sounded foreign in her head, stood barefoot in the kitchen, staring at a newspaper on the marble counter. The headline read, "The Secret Wedding of Alexander Hale Shocks Wall Street." Her photo was on the front page, her hand in his, the perfect smile she had practiced for the cameras. It should have felt like victory, but instead it felt like losing a part of herself. "Good morning," Alexander said, stepping into the room. He was already dressed in a dark suit, immaculate as always. Lena turned, her voice quiet. "The entire city knows now." "That was the point," he replied simply. "It keeps the board satisfied." She folded the paper. "And what about me? Should I start pretending to enjoy being a headline too?" His gaze flickered, almost imperceptibly. "It will pass. These things always do." There was a pause, the kind of silence that hummed between two people who lived in the same place but not the same world. "I will have the driver take you to your etiquette session at noon," Alexander continued. "There will be a stylist waiting for you. I want you to feel comfortable during the charity auction this weekend." "You mean you want me to look the part?" she said. He glanced at her, one brow raised. "Both can be true." Lena exhaled slowly. She wanted to argue, but what could she say? He had kept every promise in the contract. He had paid her debts, settled her mother's medical bills, and secured her a place she had never imagined living in. The problem was not the deal, it was how empty it all felt. That afternoon, she sat in a bright studio overlooking Central Park, while a soft-spoken coach named Clarice adjusted her posture and corrected her every gesture. "Chin up, Mrs. Hale. Smile, but not too wide. Shoulders relaxed. Elegance is quiet confidence." By the third hour, Lena's cheeks ached from polite smiles. When the lesson ended, she stepped out onto the balcony for air. From the 25th floor, the city looked small and far away. Somewhere down there, her old classroom still existed, probably filled with students drawing the same skyline she was now trapped above. That night, Alexander returned late. She was curled up on the sofa, sketchbook on her lap, pencil moving quietly. He stopped in the doorway, watching her for a moment. "I did not know you could draw," he said. She looked up, startled. "It helps me think." He crossed the room, curious. On the page was a soft charcoal portrait of the city at night, towering buildings glowing under the rain. "That is impressive," he said genuinely. "Do you ever draw?" she asked lightly. He gave a faint smile. "Numbers, maybe. My world is not as colorful as yours." Something shifted in the air. The distance between them felt smaller, more human. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for what you did for my mother." He nodded. "You do not need to thank me. It was part of the agreement." "Yes," she replied, her eyes steady on his. "But kindness is not in any contract." For a second, his composure slipped. He looked at her as if trying to understand her completely, but then the mask returned. "You should rest. Tomorrow will be busy." Ugh. When he left, Lena sat in silence, staring at the drawing. The lines blurred slightly as her eyes filled with tears she did not expect. In the quiet, the city hummed like a heartbeat beneath the glass walls. She whispered to herself, "Maybe not all of this is pretend." But even as she said it, she knew the danger of believing in something that was never meant to be real. The weekend arrived faster than Lena expected. The Hale Foundation charity auction was one of the city's most prestigious events. A night where art and wealth collided beneath chandeliers worth more than entire homes. For Lena, it was her first true test as Mrs. Hale, and the thought alone made her stomach twist. In the dressing room, the stylist pinned the last strand of her hair into a soft bun and fastened a diamond clasp at her neck. The gown shimmered pale silver under the light, its fabric delicate yet commanding. When Lena looked in the mirror, she saw someone who looked like a stranger, elegant, poised, almost unrecognizable. Alexander appeared at the doorway, dressed in a black tuxedo. His gaze lingered a little longer this time. "You look perfect," he said softly. Lena managed a small smile. "You said that before, and it is still true." For a brief moment, neither moved. Then he offered his arm. "Shall we?" The limousine glided through Fifth Avenue, the city glowing in gold outside the tinted windows. Lena's hands were clasped tightly in her lap. Alexander noticed, but said nothing. The silence between them was not hostile, only uncertain like a song that had forgotten its rhythm. At the venue, cameras flashed the moment they stepped onto the red carpet. "Mr. Hale, Mrs. Hale, over here," reporters called. Alexander's hand settled at the small of her back, steady and protective, guiding her forward through the crowd. Inside, the ballroom shimmered with crystal and candlelight. Waiters carried trays of champagne, and a string quartet played softly. Lena took a slow breath, reminding herself to smile, to nod, to play her part. Throughout the evening, guests approached them, executives, politicians, donors, each eager to meet the mysterious new Mrs. Hale. Lena answered with grace, just as Clarice had taught her. To her surprise, Alexander stayed close, occasionally stepping in to steer the conversation when he sensed her nerves. When the auction began, Lena watched as priceless paintings were sold to the highest bidders. Then the host announced a surprise addition, a painting from the Hale Private Collection. The canvas revealed a haunting image of a woman standing in the rain, her face half hidden by an umbrella. Alexander leaned closer to her. "That was my mother's favorite," he said quietly. She believed rain washed away mistakes. There was something in his voice softer, sadder, that made her turn to him. "Did she paint it?" He shook his head. "No, but she bought it the year before she died. She said it reminded her of herself." Before Lena could respond, the bidding started. It climbed higher and higher until the auctioneer's gavel struck the podium. Applause filled the room. Later, during a quiet moment near the balcony, Alexander loosened his tie, exhaling as if he could finally breathe. "You handled yourself well tonight," he said. "I was just trying not to trip," she said with a small laugh. He looked at her, genuinely amused. "You did more than that. You were graceful." The air between them grew warm, fragile. The city lights below reflected in his eyes, softening the sharpness that usually lived there. "I'm not sure what you see in me, Mr. Hale," she said. "I am just someone who signed a contract." Alexander's voice lowered. "Maybe, but tonight it did not feel like that." A brief silence hung before a gust of wind brushed through the open balcony doors. Lena's hair shifted, and he reached out instinctively to tuck a loose strand behind her ear. His fingers brushed her skein, gentle and lingering. For a heartbeat, the noise of the gala disappeared. It was only them, the billionaire who never believed in love, and the woman who was never meant to matter. But in that single, quiet moment, something unspoken passed between them. Something real, something that had nothing to do with contracts or cameras. When he finally stepped back, his voice was calm again. "We should go inside." Lena nodded, but her heart no longer obeyed reason. She knew the danger now because one look, one touch, had undone every promise she made to herself. The night after the charity auction, the penthouse felt quieter than usual. The city outside was alive with horns and lights, but inside, it was still too still. Lena stood by the window, her bare feet cold against the marble floor, replaying the evening in her mind. The way Alexander had looked at her, the way his voice had softened, the way the world had disappeared for a single moment. She told herself it meant nothing. It had to mean nothing. But her heart refused to listen. When Alexander came home later that night, the sound of the elevator doors startled her. He looked tired, his tie loosened, his eyes thoughtful. "You are still awake," he said quietly. "I could not sleep." He poured himself a glass of water, then leaned against the counter. "You did well tonight. Everyone was impressed." "That was the point, was it not?" she said softly. "To convince them that this marriage is real." He hesitated. Yes, that was the point. For a while, the only sound was the faint hum of the city below. Then he asked, "Do you regret it? Signing the contract?" Lena met his eyes. "Do you?" Alexander looked away. "I do not regret what it accomplished. That is not what I asked." He smiled faintly, but it was not a happy smile. "Regret is a luxury I cannot afford." She wanted to say more, but the weight of his words silenced her. There was pain hidden beneath his control, something raw and unhealed. She wondered what kind of past could build walls that tall. The next morning, Lena woke to find a note on the kitchen counter. "Business trip. 3 days. Do not worry about the press. Everything is arranged." She folded the note and placed it beside her sketchbook. The penthouse felt enormous without him there, beautiful, yet empty, like a museum no one visited. She tried to fill the hours with small things, painting, reading, calling her mother. But each night, she found herself glancing at the clock, waiting for a sound that never came. On the third evening, rain began to fall again. Lena sat by the window, sketching the viewed dark clouds over the skyline, streaks of light reflecting on wet streets. She had just finished shading the last building when the elevator doors opened behind her. Alexander was back, rain still glistening on his coat. His hair was damp, his shoulders tense. "You did not have to wait up," he said. "I was not waiting," she lied. He glanced at the drawing on the table. "You drew this?" She nodded. "It is what I see every night." He stepped closer, studying the lines. "It feels lonely." "It is," she admitted, "but also honest." Something in his expression changed, softened, like the man behind the armor had taken one cautious step forward. "You make loneliness sound like art," he said quietly. "Maybe it is if you let it be." He looked at her for a long time before speaking again. "When my mother died, I stopped painting. She used to tell me that art was how the soul breathes. I suppose I have been holding my breath ever since." Lena's heart ached. "Then maybe it is time to breathe again." The silence stretched, gentle and full. The city lights flickered against the glass, painting them both in gold. Alexander reached out, his fingers brushing hers on the sketchbook. "You make things feel different," he said, "less empty." Her breath caught. "Alexander." He took a step back, as if realizing how close he was. "Good night, Lena," he said softly. Then he turned and disappeared down the hall. She stood there long after he was gone, the echo of his words filling the quiet. Something between them had shifted, something fragile and real. And for the first time, Lena was not sure if she wanted to fix it or let it break her completely. The following week began with silence, but it did not last long. A rumor started spreading through the city, one headline at a time. Alexander Hale's marriage under scrutiny. Anonymous source claims contractual arrangement behind billionaire's wedding. By noon, the story was everywhere. Photographs of Lena filled the screens, captured mid-smile at the charity auction, twisted by captions that called her a gold digger, an actress, a liar. Lena sat frozen in the living room, the television light flickering against her pale face. She did not need to wonder who had leaked the story. Alexander's former fiancée, Victoria Lang, had been seen at the gala, watching them from across the room with a smile too sharp to be friendly. When the elevator chimed, Alexander stepped into the penthouse, his jaw tight, his phone pressed to his ear. "Handle it immediately," he said before hanging up. He looked at Lena, his expression unreadable. "Do you know anything about this?" Her stomach turned. "You think I would do that?" "Someone had to," he said. "The files, the agreement details, only a handful of people knew." Her voice cracked. "You think I sold you out?" He did not answer right away. That silence cut deeper than any accusation. Lena's eyes filled with tears. "Everything I have is because of that contract. Why would I destroy the only thing keeping me safe?" Alexander's tone softened slightly, but the damage was done. "It will pass. I will fix it." You mean you will bury it?" she said bitterly. "Because that is what you do, right? You bury problems until they look like control." He flinched as if her words struck a nerve. "You do not understand what is at stake here." "Then help me understand," she pleaded. "Because from where I stand, I am the one losing everything while you are worried about headlines." He turned away, his shoulders rigid. "This conversation is over." When he left, the door clicked softly behind him, but the sound felt final. Hours later, the story worsened. A gossip channel released a leaked document, an image of the contract she had signed. Her signature, his initials, The terms. It was undeniable. The internet exploded. Lena's phone buzzed with messages from unknown numbers, cruel comments flooding her social pages. She shut it off and buried her face in her hands. By the time Alexander returned that night, the penthouse was dark except for the dim light from the city outside. She stood near the window, her reflection trembling in the glass. "Did you find out who leaked it?" she asked quietly. He looked exhausted. "My legal team is investigating." Her voice broke. "It does not matter anymore. The damage is done. I cannot go back to my job, to my life. They will never see me as anything but a fraud." He took a step closer. "Lena, I will protect you." "Oh." She shook her head, tears falling freely now. "You cannot protect someone you do not trust." He tried to reach for her hand, but she stepped back. "Do not," she whispered. "Just do not." For the first time, Alexander looked lost. The man who built empires could not find a single word that would make her stay. Lena turned away, her voice barely above a whisper. "You said this was just business. I guess we both forgot." She grabbed her coat and walked out before he could stop her. The elevator doors closed, leaving him alone in the quiet that suddenly felt unbearable. Outside, rain began to fall again, soft and relentless. As Lena stepped onto the empty street, she looked up at the glowing skyline and felt her chest tighten. For the first time since signing that contract, she was free, yet somehow more broken than ever. Inside the penthouse, Alexander stood at the window where she had once watched the city. His reflection looked back at him, cold and hollow. He whispered to the empty room, "I never meant to lose her." But by the time he realized it, Lena was already gone. Days turned into weeks, and Lena disappeared from the headlines as quickly as she had been thrown into them. The world moved on, but Alexander Hale did not. The penthouse that had once been a fortress of silence now felt like a hollow monument to what he had destroyed. He went through every lead, every report, until the truth surfaced. It was Victoria Lang. She had paid an assistant from the legal department to steal the contract and leak it to the press. When confronted, she did not deny it. Her smirk had been calm, cruel. "You were always impossible to hurt, Alexander. I just wanted to remind you that even you can bleed." For the first time in years, Alexander had no words. He walked out of the meeting room, straight into the rain, the same kind that had started it all. He thought of Lena's eyes that night she left hurt, not angry, and knew that fixing the story was not enough. He had to fix what he broke in her. A month later, the Hale Foundation hosted another event, this time to announce a new community art initiative. It was the same project Lena had once dreamed about during their quiet evenings together. Alexander made sure her name was written at the top of the announcement. "The Lena Moore Art Scholarship Fund," he said at the podium, his voice steady before a silent crowd. "This is not charity," he continued. "This is redemption. For every person who was ever doubted because they came from nothing. For every teacher who believed art could heal the soul." Reporters were stunned. It was the first time the billionaire had ever spoken from his heart. Cameras flashed, but Alexander did not care. Somewhere out there, he hoped Lena was watching. She was. From the back of the room, half hidden behind a pillar, Lena stood frozen. She had not planned to come, but when she saw her name on the invitation, curiosity and something deeper had pulled her here. Hearing him speak, she felt her chest tighten. The man at the microphone was not the same cold stranger who once called their marriage just business. After the event ended, Alexander stepped off the stage, surrounded by reporters. When he looked up, he saw her standing by the door, trembling slightly, her eyes glistening. The crowd faded. "Lena," he breathed, his voice breaking for the first time. She swallowed hard. "You should not have used my name." "I had to," he said. "It was the only way to say I am sorry." The reporters turned their cameras toward them, but Alexander did not seem to notice. "You were right," he said clearly. "I buried everything, my mistakes, my feelings, myself, and I lost you because of it." She shook her head, her voice soft. "You cannot undo what the world saw." "Then let me show them something else," he said. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper, the old contract. "This is what started everything," he said, holding it up for everyone to see. "A deal, a transaction, a lie." He tore it in half, then again the pieces fluttering to the floor like snow. "But this is what is real." He turned toward her, eyes steady. "Lena Moore, I do not care if the world doubts me. I only care if you still do." The room fell silent. Even the cameras stopped flashing. Tears slipped down her cheeks. "You cannot just fix it with a speech," she whispered. "I know," he said. "But I can start by being honest. For once." He stepped closer, his voice trembling but sure. "The night I asked you to marry me, I did not believe in love. The night you left, I realized I did not believe in anything without it." Ho! The audience erupted in applause, but to them, it was only noise. Lena stared at him, her heart warring with the memory of everything she had lost. Finally, she said, "I do not know if I can trust you again." He nodded slowly. "Then let me earn it." For the first time in weeks, she did not walk away. And for the first time in his life, Alexander Hale smiled, not the practiced smile of a billionaire, but the kind that belonged to a man who had finally learned how to be human. 3 months later, the gallery lights glowed warm against the evening rain. The crowd was smaller than usual, intimate, quiet the way Lena had requested. The Lena Moore Art Scholarship exhibition was finally opening, featuring pieces from young artists across the city. But near the center of the gallery hung a single painting that stopped everyone in their tracks. It was titled, "The Rain That Started It All." The painting showed 2 figures standing beneath a storm, one offering an umbrella, the other holding a sketchbook against her heart. It was soft, haunting, and unmistakably hers. Alexander stood at the edge of the room, hands in his pockets, watching from a distance. He had helped fund every piece of this night, but he had not spoken to Lena since the press conference. She had agreed to let him use her name for the foundation, but nothing more. When she finally entered the gallery, the room seemed to shift. She wore a simple navy dress, her hair pinned loosely, her eyes calm but searching. Their gaze met across the crowd. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then she walked toward him. "You kept your promise," she said quietly. He nodded. "You kept your dream." They stood side by side, looking at the painting. "You painted this," he said. "It is what I remember," she replied. "The night everything changed." There was a pause before he spoke again. "I have something for you." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small velvet box. Inside was not a diamond, but a silver key. "What is this?" she asked. "The studio on West 52nd Street, he said. "It was my mother's. She used to paint there. I thought maybe it is time someone else fills it with color again." Her voice caught. "You are giving it to me?" He smiled softly. "No, I'm giving it back to where it belongs." Tears gathered in her eyes, but she blinked them away. "Alexander, I never wanted your money." "I know," he said. "You wanted honesty. You wanted to be seen. And I did not see you until it was too late." She looked at him for a long time before whispering, "Maybe it is not too late." He took a cautious step closer. "Then tell me what to do." "Start over," she said. "No contracts, no appearances, just us." He let out a breath that sounded almost like a laugh. "Do I get to keep the wife title this time?" She smiled faintly. "Earn it first." He reached for her hand, hesitant, as if afraid she might disappear again. But she did not. Their fingers intertwined, and for the first time, it felt effortless. When the crowd began to applaud for the closing remarks, they stayed near the painting. Alexander turned to her, voice low and steady. "I was wrong when I said one kiss meant nothing." Lena tilted her head, eyes soft. "What does it mean now?" He looked at her and the words came easily. "It means forever." She smiled through quiet tears. "Then kiss me again, just to be sure." And he did. It was nothing like the first kiss in that rain-soaked rooftop. It was slower, certain, the kind of kiss that carried both apology and promise. Around them, the crowd faded into silence. The lights glimmered like stars, and somewhere outside, the rain began again. Later that night, as they stepped out into the cool air, Lena looked up at the city skyline and whispered, "Do you think people like us can really find happy endings?" Alexander slipped his coat around her shoulders and said, "Maybe happy endings are not found. Maybe we build them." She smiled, leaning against him as they walked toward the car. Behind them, through the glass of the gallery, the painting of "The Rain That Started It All" glowed under soft light, a reminder that even the coldest storms could lead to something beautiful. And as the city shimmered in the distance, their story once built on paper finally became real.